Have you ever looked at your child and thought, I love them so much, but I don't always get to enjoy them? When your days are filled with therapy appointments and structure and managing meltdowns, the joy of simply being with your child can get lost in the shuffle. Today's conversation is all about bringing the joy back into your relationship with your child, not by adding more to your plate, but by understanding what's really going on beneath the behaviors and creating space for connection, calm, and delight again. Welcome to the LD Expert Podcast, your place for answers and solutions for dyslexia and learning differences. I'm your host, Jill Stowell, founder and executive director of Stowell Learning Centers and author of Take the Stone Out of the Shoe, a must-have guide to understanding, supporting, and correcting dyslexia learning and attention challenges. So let's be honest. Parenting a child with learning, attention, or sensory processing challenges can be one of the most meaningful journeys you'll ever take, and also one of the most exhausting. Do you ever feel like your entire life is a checklist of appointments and meltdowns and battles over homework? Today, we're having a conversation that I believe every parent of a neurodiverse child will want to hear: how to move beyond managing the chaos and actually rediscover joy. My guest today is Cherie Francis-Boegeman. Cherie has been an occupational therapist for over 30 years. She has specialized in pediatrics for the last 15 years, with a transition from being rehabilitation manager at Children's Hospital of Orange County, California, to owning her own clinic. Lifelong friends from Cherie's own early school days have said, I can't believe you found a job where you get paid to play. Cherie and I are very aligned in our belief that behavior is communication, and that when we take the time to really understand what's going on beneath the surface, it opens the door to healing, connection, and change. Welcome, Cherie.
It's good to see you, Jill.
You too. It's so great to have you, and I'm really excited about this conversation. So let's just start by having you tell us a little bit about the Launchpad Therapy for Kids and what you've learned over all these years walking alongside so many kids and families.
Yes, thanks for asking. The Launchpad Therapy for Kids started actually 18 years ago, and I was previously a manager at Children's Hospital of Orange County, and we realized that at the hospital the need was more for the more critical kids, so those kids that were failure to thrive, and the sensory integrative kids were pretty healthy actually, and so we needed to make space. And so as we did that, we realized that they were the sensory integrative kids were being put on the waiting list, while the more prioritized kids were being put to the front, which understandably so. And I knew that this was my love, and probably from my early childhood, because I am one of these kids. My mother was a teacher, and she had tremendous grace for me. And I remember as a child being invited over to homes and then getting in trouble and getting sent home. And I remember crying as my mother was folding laundry, and she said, she would always comfort. But the one house that always loved having me was somebody where they had a child that her siblings were older, they were in their 20s, and she really didn't have a playmate, and I kept her very entertained. And I was a big seeker. I wanted to move and was very rambunctious. And I have a vivid childhood memory of swinging on their window dressings and the entire thing crashing down. We were playing Tarzan. And, I should have learned from that, but that's, they embraced me, and they would take me on vacations because I did keep them entertained, and they also had a lot of grace. So I understand these kids. I know that the intention isn't to misbehave, but it's like they're putting the brakes on life. And we've learned. I pursued, after Children's Hospital, I pursued my certification in sensory integration, and I worked at a private clinic briefly, letting them know that I'd like to open my own clinic. It was due to a love that I was introduced to me in college. I had a fabulous teacher that was trained in sensory integration. And at this point in my career, my management met up with my pediatric experience. And I always had a vision of owning my own clinic. And here we are. We have had therapy for kids.
I feel like your story probably really resonates with so many parents, whose kids are rambunctious and, do things like swing on the curtains and not realize that it's going to be a problem. And so, parents, I just want to say to you, if that sparked anything for you, we would love for you to leave a comment and let us know one thing about your child that surprised you or made you start to look at things differently. I think a lot of what we're going to talk about today will really resonate with you. And so sharing your experiences helps other parents like you who are on the same kind of journey. So I love how you talked about this group of sensory integrative kids who, in a hospital setting, they just weren't severe enough. And so they seemed like they were pretty okay, and they didn't get the help that they also need. And I feel like that was kind of my experience with learning disabilities. I was a learning disability specialist in the schools, and it's very interesting because that group of kids, like kids with sensory integration issues, they're typical kids. They're smart and creative and fun, and yet they have some underlying issues that are getting in their way, but they're not that bad, in a way. And so they get overlooked, and they get thought of as doing it intentionally, not trying hard enough, being a behavior problem. And that's just not the issue at all.
It's interesting, Jill. Jean Ayres, 40 years ago, wrote a book, Sensory Integration and Learning Disabilities. So her work actually started with kids that had learning disabilities, and she understood that the sensory systems weren't integrated at the midbrain level. And I read a book, reread a book recently by a colleague, Angela Hanscom, who wrote the book Balanced and Barefoot, that opened up. I don't know are you familiar with that? She was an occupational therapist, I believe, in the schools, and she wanted to figure out an income over the summer. So she goes, well, I'm going to do science camps, and I'm going to clear this area. And this so she did that, but she had some barriers to overcome. Like, she was in New York, and so their ticks were a problem. But she cleared this whole area, and then she discovered they were coming up and asking her science questions. She's like, I'm not equipped to answer these science questions. I'm just an occupational therapist. But then she realized that what the kids were doing, they were playing. They were playing in this outdoor area. They were coming up with their own social rules. They were overcoming the barriers. They were getting these tremendous sensory experiences by being outdoors and building forts and swinging and climbing trees. And she had already gotten the parents online that, okay, the ticks are not going to be a problem. We've cleared this out. So she overcame the logistics and then developed this camp. And people come from all over the world now to be trained by her to open up these essentially outdoor areas. But I think the thing that really stood out to me is just how natural. I mean, I'm an occupational therapist, and so we look at people's occupations. And for a child, one of their biggest occupations is play. And I think play has really changed over the years. And we can talk a little bit about that. But the Balanced and Barefoot book kind of talks about why sensory integration is so important for learning. You know, if you think of something like handwriting, handwriting just isn't as simple, we're going to write the letters. You have to have, first of all, core strength. You have to be able to sit there. You have to have proximal stability. You have to be able to keep your posture. If you lean down to pick up your pencil and you fall out of your chair, you're going to have a lot of extra effort to just write those words. Now, and then we're talking about being able to form the letters, and letter reversals, which can be vestibular issues, or it's the processing between the two hemispheres. But anyway, those things all naturally occur through play. You know, all this visual things and bringing those two systems together. So, and that's what I want to bring to families is just the therapeutic benefits of play. We're not making a therapist out of you, but we, here's some ideas to bring joy back and really understand your child.
Absolutely. And, you said that how play looks today has really changed. And that's so true, because there's so much in the digital space that is entertaining and educational and very engaging. But it's really using a very confined space and fine muscle movements, and without that solid base of big movement underneath, you're really going to run into challenges. So you've been using the term sensory integration, and I know we've talked about sensory processing together. Can you just help our listeners just understand what sensory processing is? And because it does have such an impact on a child's behavior and learning and emotional regulation. And I think it's just something most of us take for granted.
Mm-hmm. Sure. Sensory processing is how we perceive our environment. And if you think about the different ways we perceive our environment, it's we have the five senses: vision, taste, smell, hearing, and touch. And then in addition to that, we have other senses. Interoception. And interoception is, do I feel my bladder full? Do I need to go void it? Am I hungry? Am I thirsty? So those are all interoception. And then we also have proprioception, which is joint sense. That's where we can tell where our body is in space and not have to look. So I can feel the tension on my muscles and joints. And then probably the most important system that we work with is the vestibular system, and you cannot separate it. It's very difficult to separate it from other sensory systems. And when I talk about vestibular, I talk about movement or our relationship to gravity, sometimes balance. But it's that system that is responsible for maintaining a level of alertness. And oftentimes our kids, that when they sit for long periods, just like we do in a conference, our sensory, we tend to inhibit. So just simply getting a drink of water or standing up in the room helps to bring our arousal level up so that we can better pay attention. But that vestibular system also impacts vision. So we need that movement to coordinate the ocular motor control of our eyes. It's postural responses. Those two systems are closely linked. I had gone to a conference where the aerospace
Mhm.
industry was talking about vestibular, and the researcher up on stage, talked about vection and how, so if you're at a stoplight and the car next to you starts to move, you feel like you're moving and you slam your brakes on. So that shows you how closely those two systems are connected. Like you actually feel like you're moving. And the other thing I thought was so fascinating by this lecture is it's the vestibular system that we get our relationship of time, distance, speed, and space. And those are all foundational for learning. And so, so I'll explain briefly why that is. But if you think of the brain as being a computer, and if I walk, I see, okay, there's my ball over there. I'm going to walk that far. I can predict how far it's going to, how far it is, how long it's going to take me to get there, and how fast I need to go. And all of that are data points. And we're constantly taking data points. But if one of the systems is askew, we're not getting accurate data points. And this can show up in writing when we cram our letters together at the end, or when we're trying to draw or build in three-dimensional space. All of these have to do with our sensory systems. The vestibular system also is related to the auditory system. The receptors are in the inner ear, and we find Jean Ayres found out when she was doing her research that when these kids improved in the integration of their vestibular system, their auditory processing also improved. And Tomatis, who was studying over in Europe, same thing. Even though he was working on the auditory system, the kids' balance improved. So all of these are very important when it comes to learning and just kids having a joyful life. And there's things when those go askew that takes the joy out, or just makes things quite a bit harder for them.
That is so fascinating to me. And I think for parents and teachers, if we have that bigger picture of what is happening underneath all of the learning that we expect, for kids to do. When kids go to school, they're supposed to sit still in their chair. They're supposed to be able to, navigate their materials, find things easily, write their letters and all of that. But all of those things have lower level skills. And even things like the bladder control you were talking about, that's a sense that we sense that that's happening. And so often, kids get into trouble when they have an accident, or they fall out of their chair when they are supposed to be, writing something, or, they get up and start dancing around or humming, or, yeah, those things are disruptive. But we both, operate with this belief that behavior is never just behavior. It's a signal that something deeper is going on. And so first, I think for parents and teachers and anybody who's around kids to first have that recognition that, if there's something you're seeing that you feel like isn't, like the kid isn't behaving the way you think they should. I mean, yeah, kids test us and all of that, but sometimes the real issue is lagging skills underneath. So that awareness is very helpful in how we approach kids then. But also, I think that just is a huge message to all of us, that kids need to be playing and moving, and don't worry that they're going to get behind because they're not getting enough learning on the screen. That the world is full of that, but they need to get outside and move those bodies to develop the skills that allow them to do things like handwriting, or move their eyes across the page for reading, and things like that.
It's interesting. So I lived through COVID, being an occupational therapist in a school district, and so we were online. And
Mhm,
so I was charged with how do I do occupational therapy online, and we had not done this before. That opened up a whole new world.
mhm,
And so we figured it out, and we actually did a webinar on, take the camera. You had to warn the parents, like, your son's going to be taking the camera around through the house so we can see what kinds of things you have, and
mhm,
how we going to build obstacle courses and all of that. But one of the things we found coming through COVID was it's a very limited, like it's two-dimensional in terms of taking that information into the body.
mhm,
When you go outside and you're playing, it's three-dimensional, in which you can hear the birds in the background. So you got that peripheral auditory, you have the peripheral view visually. You're also moving through space. So now you have movement attached with vision. So while you're swinging and trying to land somewhere. So I think that when we are in the virtual world, we're not experiencing life in full color, I would say.
mhm.
And
Uh-huh.
and we saw that with the kids. They were very, like, for some kids, it was very beneficial because it cut out all the things that overstimulated them. And all of a sudden, oh, in this on this screen, all I have to do is pay attention to this. But for a lot of the kids, if they weren't moving, or had the opportunity to get the extra input, then it was very hard for them.
So, what shifts have you seen in children and families once that those underlying issues, things like retained reflexes or sensory processing challenges, start to resolve?
Mhm. Yeah, I would say, like, well, let me give some examples. So some things like, um, probably the biggest thing is the child's sense of well-being gets restored.
Mhm,
And when the child's sense of well-being gets restored, their confidence and their willingness to take risks, and their ability to tolerate frustration, so the ability to emotionally regulate, improves. So they can sit, they can tolerate frustration, they can wait their turn, impulse control improves. And I want to state, like, here are some ways that the sensory systems can become askew. So anxiety can happen when that vestibular system isn't working. So if they're walking downstairs into forward space, that can be very anxiety provoking, and that's why some kids don't like to go down the escalators. And the reason why malls often are hard for kids, because the sound reverberates in there. So things that we've seen, so hyper responsivity to some types of input, the flushing of a toilet, might a child might avoid going into public restrooms because it's pretty assaultive. But the other thing that can be difficult is how they organize their perception of the environment for use. And we call that praxis. So when we talk about praxis, that's the ability to come up with an idea, make a plan, execute that plan, and then have feedback that, okay, that plan worked or it didn't work. And praxis occurs, and it has to be a novel situation. So for us, it might be throwing a dinner party if you don't entertain regularly. Like, those are a lot of moving pieces to pull together. For kids, it could be a social, being able to play with friends and being able to adjust their expectations. Okay, I'm going to play what they want to play, and then I'll get a chance to play. So that emotional regulation is very important. So things that we've seen that have shifted with kids is, we've had family recently return, and they said, we went on vacation and it was glorious. We didn't have any meltdowns. The child was
mhm,
very happy. It was a really great time for the family. Other things that happen are, we can go to a restaurant and the kids aren't up and running from the table. We can actually engage and have an enjoyable time at a restaurant. Uh, but I do think the biggest thing that changes is the child's sense of well-being. Like, they feel good about themselves,
mhm.
and then their confidence improves.
And, when any of our systems are a little bit off, And we've all experienced that some, like if we have a cold and our ears are really plugged and we just sort of feel a little off kilter because we can't hear exactly right, or our balance is a little bit off or something. And so if any of those skills, are just not supporting the student well enough, then they're going to just constantly be operating with a little bit more heightened, sense of alertness or stress, and just a little off kilter. And so as the body starts to integrate and regulate, we all feel better, and so that's a really natural outcome, and we see that as well. I remember a 12-year-old boy that we were working with who had dyslexia and auditory processing challenges, and we were doing auditory stimulation and training with him so that he could process the sounds in words better, so that he would be able to, learn to read more easily. And within a couple of months into his program, his mom said, "Everyone in the family is getting along better. We speak to each other differently now." And it's just so interesting that when you start to develop the skills at the root of the problem, there's this ripple effect that is real, because the child is feeling more confident and better, and that impacts the family. And so it's a really fun process to see. There was something else that you were talking, just as you are talking, Cherie, I can just visualize how critical the three-dimensional space is. And, in video games and all of the things that we do digitally, I mean, the digital world is so advanced that, I mean, you can go downstairs on your iPad, you can kind of see that and it looks like it's three-dimensional, but that's not anything the same
No.
as doing it with your body and what your eyes have to process there. And so, just another plug for spending time in the real three-dimensional world.
One thing, well, a couple things I wanted to say. When a child is not perceiving things accurately, what happens is they have to devote extra cognitive effort to do things that come subcortically to other children or without cognitive effort. And what it does is it robs them from new learning. So if they're busy paying attention to things that should come naturally, then they're not able to pay attention to the new learning. So that was one thing. The other thing I thought was interesting recently, my husband showed me a video that went viral on YouTube recently, and it was a teacher that had taught 3 years, and she said, "I'm out." And what she said was that the AI is kind of robbing students from grappling with things. And I think that's what the virtual does. Let's take out if you're like that idea of going downstairs. Not only are you going downstairs, but your muscles and your body is working. You're having to keep yourself upright. Exercise. So kids' natural form of exercise is going to a playground, and the health benefits of that. The lymphatic system being able to move, the toxins are being released from the body. The endorphins that are being built in the body. And one thing that we do know is when the child is playing, endorphins are being released in the body, and that helps to myelinate the nervous system. When kids are stressed, cortisol is in the system, and it is the myelination process is really impaired. So it's important to have that play and be in three-dimensional space.
Right. And just that myelinization process is what helps set those new neural pathways in
Yeah.
place so
Mhm.
that you can call on them at another time. So it's really, really important. Yeah.
The other thing I was thinking about, so we talk about constructional praxis, and that's building. And when kids, and we how we evaluate that is when in two-dimensional space, like how they go about drawing novel shapes. But we also look at how they might put things together, how they might build things either in blocks or some there's a test that we do, make a silly room, and we say, here's a picture of the room, we want you to duplicate it, and there's chairs and a table and a yoga mat, and they have to figure it out. And I was thinking, we also serve a school district, and the kids that have difficulty with this constructional praxis also have difficulty writing in paragraph forms or putting an essay together. So they have to think of, what's the big picture? How do I break this down into paragraphs in a way that the person is going to receive it? And that's what this teacher was talking about. Everything's AI, and they're taking it's a band-aid, and they're not grappling through this. And that's how we learn. We learn through our body. We first experience it. And that's also how we learn to take perspective. It's through our own experience first, and then we can, perhaps they're feeling what I'm feeling. Or, so if you can't feel your own body accurately, you're
Right.
definitely not going to be able to take perspective with somebody else.
Right. I just love listening to what you're saying because it paints such a good picture of how, these higher level skills that we want students to have, like perspective taking, or you were talking about, time. So many parents are concerned about time management with their kids.
Mhm.
Well, those kinds of skills, all those higher level skills, really started with movement.
Correct.
And so, and it's never too late. There's so much health benefit in movement for everyone of every age. And kids are just little learning machines. But, you know, even if your child's a teenager or, as a grown up, there's still a lot to be learned in three-dimensional space,
Mhm.
and a lot of benefit there. So.
Yeah, I was going to give your parents some ideas on how to return to joy.
Well, and that was exactly the next place I wanted to go since we promised that. Uh,
Yes. So, we going through COVID experienced, I mean, let's all own it. We have stress. We post-traumatic stress from that event in our lives. And we, as parents of kids that are neurodivergent or things don't come as easily, they also have stress. I didn't realize it because I wasn't in this field at the time, but my daughter was hypersensitive to touch and to visual stimuli, and she would go to the market and just have a meltdown. So I'd take the car, I'd leave the cart, I'd take her outside, let her melt down, and then I learned later that, oh, no wonder it was so stimulating in there. And she just did not like certain types of clothing. Was her tactile system was hyper responsive. But here are some things that parents can do. The other thing that we found over, like, how, and I wouldn't call it play. There's certain criteria for it to be considered play, and that it is not time restricted. It's outside of time. It is not adult directed. So, as healthy as it is getting our kids outdoors and in sports, sometimes a big problem that we're seeing is these kids are overscheduled. They
Mhm.
need to have their downtime. And if they're running, if you have siblings and everybody's going, and then you're going to this event and to that event, we're going to ballet, we're going to baseball, we're going to whatever the events are, it's not giving the child just that downtime to regroup. So play is joyful. it releases endorphins. There's no demands that are being placed. The child doesn't feel like they need to perform. It's directed. So when we work with kids, we find out, okay, what do they want to play? But we have in our back pocket some of the things we want to do. But even that, that's more focusing on something that we want to get to. So there's certain criteria of play. There's like, you're not afraid to be silly or look foolish. So that's another concept of play. Sorry, I'm going to reference my notes. It's voluntary. There's an inherent attraction to it. It's freedom from time. There's a diminished consciousness of self. So you're not worrying about yourself. There's the potential for things to go sideways. And as therapists, we're always like, we always dream big on the activity that we're going to do, knowing that it's going to have, like one time I was doing water play with one of my little friends, and all of a sudden it turned into the water got spilled all over the floor. So then it turned into an ice skating game, and then it turned into a cleaning up the whole thing game. But that was, improv. We didn't know what was going to happen, and then the play continues because there's a desire for it to happen. So my recommendations for parents is, first of all, be aware of your child's sensory needs. If they here's an example. I had a mom recently that was just, like, husband worked outside of the home, had a job where it would take, he did 72 hours on, so many hours off. And so she was single parenting for those 72 hours. And she had 3 kids that were very young. And one of the kids came up to her and said, "Mom, can you please do this, fix this toy?" And he goes, and she was washing dishes. And he said, but first, dry your hands. And she said, "I am not going to dry my hands. Come over here and, don't be silly. Let me fix it." Well, water got on his shirt, had a major meltdown, and it took her 20 minutes to recover. Once she understood, she's like, "Oh my gosh," like it's like all of a sudden in, movies, when you get a certain fact and then you can see back in your history and everything made sense. Mm-hmm. Those sensory issues can really impact that harmony in the home. But just those opportunities to get outside. I had my niece and nephew come recently, and I live in an area in Lake Forest that has woods and a nature hike. So I'm like, let's just go on a nature hike. And just the uneven balance of the dirt, the different bugs and insects that we saw, the creek that we had to cross. And then there was this part where we had one of those corrugated tunnels that you had to walk through. So to get across that, we had to spread our legs and navigate this uneven surface. The kids were delighted. They were a little scared at parts, but then they had this tremendous sense of accomplishment. And so just, that being curious when we see behaviors like I'm curious as to what is causing this, and sometimes kids can't articulate it because they're they're in that fight or freeze mode. So they can't always articulate what happened. And sometimes they don't even know. I know for me, when I'm tired at the end of the day and my husband wants to open up those popsicle cellophane wrappers, I hand him scissors. I'm like, I can't take it. I love you much, but this is too much for my sensory system. But we can really nourish our sensory systems by getting outside, having that opportunity to exhale. Like, how good does it feel to be able to go down to the beach and just watch the waves? How, just taking a pause in life. Those are,
and I think if you think about the definition that you gave of play, that takes a lot of pressure off of the parent, because in the summer especially, it's kind of like, okay, now what do we have? What activities can I do for my kids all summer? Well, just, that's a great time to start to just say, you know what? I'm going to give them space to play. just to
Mhm.
play. And
Mhm.
I don't have to direct it. I don't have to invent it. I can participate or not, but they get to do it.
Mhm.
So that's kind of freeing.
Yes, it's very freeing. Some kids might need a little bit of help playing, and that's because of the praxis challenges. But, you get a group of kids, could just go down to a local park, you'll see, that they will engage in play and they'll make up games. They'll try to, break rules by going up the slide, climbing up the slide the front way. I say that's okay. That's a much bigger bilateral challenge than it is climbing up the backside. And yeah.
And that's how we learn
Mhm.
about all kinds of, how much strength we need, about balance, about force, about space. I mean, there's just so much learning that goes on there. I have a 3-year-old great niece, and she is just a little playing machine. You take her anywhere, and she is discovering and running and climbing and rolling, and it's so much fun to watch, because now, with the kind of perspective that we have about these underlying skills, I can just see all of the things that are developing for her, and in all this free play. Um,
Mhm.
it's very fun, and believe me, she's gonna climb a slide backward.
And jump off from the highest place.
Right, right. So I sort of hover, like, to make sure nothing happens. I don't want her to get hurt, but
Right, right. Of course.
also let her, you
Mhm.
know?
Yes. I mothers used to look at me. I knew my son was pretty agile, and I knew that, his father was very athletic. So, and I knew what his abilities were. I mean, he used to literally climb the walls at at home, and he used to like navigate on the outside of the play structure. And parents were like, "Oh, whose kid is that?" And I'm like, "It's mine. He's fine. He can handle it." But, it's like, you got to be careful though. Don't set bad examples for the kids that aren't able to do that. But, there's that risk taking and knowing what your limits and being able to experience your body, and that risk taking behavior comes in learning. Like, okay, I'm willing to take this risk. If it doesn't turn out, that's okay. I can figure it out.
Yeah, yeah. So, uh, for a parent who is listening, who feels like every day is just a battle, what would you say is one thing that they could try this week to ease the pressure a little bit?
I would say, okay, this is it, the golden ticket. Um, one of the technologies I've been learning about recently is called collaborative problem solving. And one of the things they look at is the parent or the professional and your own state regulation. So where are you? Where's your stress out? Or are you stressed out? And when we're stressed out, we have less capacity to give space to our kids. And so, take first of all, being aware of where you're at, and is that the way that you want to be interacting with your child. So do some things for yourself that bring joy. Sometimes there was a book that I read called The Artist's Way, and it was intended to um, bring writers through a writing block, so bringing creativity back. And one of the things one of the chapters was on scheduling a date with yourself. So
Mhm.
if I had nobody imposing on me, and I could do whatever I wanted for this 2 hour of time, and you might have to make some arrangements ahead of time to have somebody be your kids and that they're well taken care of. But what would I do for these 2 hours that would really bring life to me? Or I just want to explore. I might go down to, we live in, near Laguna Beach, and just walking down Laguna Beach and looking in some of the windows of the art galleries. Or one time I went to Home Depot, and they have, like, in the paint department, you can actually create a room and try different paints and color schemes. And I'm like, that was kind of cool. So anyway, what some people take on different leisure opportunities, but I would say the biggest thing you can do that would be a gift for your child is to take care of yourself. Take care of making sure you are well regulated to have capacity for them. And then when you're in that space, be curious about them. And kids know, parents automatically get a mulligan in terms of, it's like kids are going to love you because you're their parent. But I can say that kids know if somebody is putting on a smile to be in because it's the appropriate thing to do, but they really are being challenged by being in front of that child. They're not fooling that kid. There's a part of the brain called the cingulate gyrus, and that child knows within less of a second whether you truly are being joyful and just love being in their presence. And that is now research is showing that heals trauma. It actually heals DNA. So when we're taking care of ourselves and we are in a space to find joy and curious and just observe, I can't help myself now. I'm on a plane, I'm in the airport, or I'm wherever I go, I'm watching kids because they are so funny. It's like, what are they going to find interesting? And then you can kind of see them get into a little bit of trouble with their siblings. And if you just take a moment and observe, it's joyful. It's joyful to see that and to celebrate that joy with them.
Mm-hmm. So I think especially for moms, taking time for ourselves, even taking 5 minutes, it's very easy to say, but I don't have 5 minutes. I've got to get, my kids all these different places, and I've got to take care of all these things. And so for parents listening, I would love it if there's something, a big thing or a small thing that you do for yourself to take care of you. I would love for you to share that in the comments, because it's a hard thing for us to do when we have all these responsibilities and that we're trying to take care of day to day. But it really is true. It's sort of that put the oxygen mask on you first kind of a philosophy. I mean, you have so much more resilience and more to give, more empathy, if you're in a calmer space yourself. So I would love for you to share if there's something that you do for yourself to bring you to that space. So Cherie, summer is a great opportunity for a reset. What kinds of support or programs are you offering this summer through the Launchpad?
Thanks for asking. Because we work in a school district, I still pay those therapists and I have to keep them busy during the summer. So what we do is we offer summer classes, and it's similar to taking like a Pilates class. We have a platform where you can go and purchase a pass. The more classes you purchase, the deeper the discount you have. And we do things that parent, like reinforcing fine motor skills, handwriting opportunities, play, gross motor play in the gym. We have like a ninja course where they set up obstacle courses. And because we are let's see, what I want to say is because we're a small clinic and we are we want to keep the classes small. So it's 4 kids to a class, and it's 1 adult, usually a therapist or somebody that knows the kids well, an intern, or my assistant Grace, who you wouldn't know she wasn't a therapist, but running the classes. And then we can tailor the classes according to who shows up or how, the kids that we know. And once we have the experience with them. So it's designed for kids that are challenged and not challenged. And they all really have a great time. So we do have those classes. And if you go to our website, you'll be able to see what the menu is.
And we'll be putting up those links in the show notes. So, as we head towards August and September, do you have any favorite tips or low pressure routines that can help families kind of hold on to that calmer, hopefully more connected energy of summer as they head into the school year?
Yes. You're reminding me that summer can be a hard time for families. Some of these kids are very reliant on structure to
Mhm.
keep them regulated. They're reliant on routine and what is familiar. So transitioning into summer, if you can have, for those kids, having some semblance of routine, like,
Mhm.
this is what we do every day, that will support them, and even keeping sleep habits if possible. Now, going back into the school year, this can provide, kids can become anxious. We only see the top of the glacier, or the what do you
The
call it?
iceberg.
Iceberg. Thank you. We only see the top of that, and what we don't see is all the catastrophic thoughts underneath about school. So if it's a new school, going to visit the campus, and
Mhm.
and let's make it an exciting time. Let's get your backpack, let's get your lunch, shopping for clothes, and getting excited about, oh, you're going to be going to school, and then front loading them of what it might be like. So that would be really helpful as well. So keeping routine during the summer for those kids that need to keep it, and then front loading before they move into the school year. And then once the school year starts, just know that those first couple weeks, they're getting adjusted. There's big demands being placed on them as they learn things, as they get back into routines. So have gaps built into your schedule to allow them to have a moment to exhale, to debrief, like on the way home, instead of going straight home, maybe go to the park, let them play a little bit. So give them grace, give them gap when they're having challenges, and recognize those challenges are real. They are, that is a big demand for a child, to go into a new environment, particularly when there's new friends, or even returning when they haven't seen friends for a while. New teacher, new rules in the classroom. Those are big demands for these kids.
As you were talking, it made me think about the fact that um, all of the things that we think of and do to help our neurodiverse kids just function better, well, actually, those are things that everybody needs. I mean, all of our kids, we as adults, we still need some semblance of structure in our lives, even when it's a vacation. And we still need to sort of front load and have a little grace for ourselves as we go into new situations. So I love all of that. And it certainly is really critical for our kids who tend to get anxious or don't like change. I mean, that's really critical, but it's valuable to all of your kids and your family.
Mm-hmm.
So if you could leave parents with just one encouragement or reminder today, what would it be?
I would say there are a lot of people in your life that are telling you how to parent and what you should be doing. God gave your kids you.
Mm,
He picked you out for your kids. You know, and you are equipped to parent your child and parent your child well. So know that, and trust your instincts.
mm. Thank you. Thank you so much for that. Cherie, thank you for taking the time to be with us today and for all of the lives that you are changing.
Thank
We
you, Jill. It's
appreciate
been a
you.
pleasure. And I'm so glad our paths have crossed. I think we're kindred spirits, and I look forward to growing more with you.
Agreed.
Mhm.
If you would like to connect with Cherie, you can go to launchpadot.com, or find her on Instagram and Facebook. We'll put the links in the show notes. The challenges associated with dyslexia or other learning disabilities can actually be dramatically improved when we stop using Band-Aid approaches and start strengthening weak or underlying skills that are missing or lagging. Contrary to popular belief, your child doesn't have to just live with it for the rest of their life. Every day doesn't have to be a battle for your family. We're on a mission to help as many people as possible. So if this episode resonated with you, we would love it if you would help spread the word by liking, subscribing, or sharing this or any of our LD Expert podcast episodes so that we can reach families who really need the encouragement and hope and real solutions. Let's change the narrative for struggling students together.